Welcome to Ignite Church today. I want to jump right into the word for today. Let me explain how this message came about first. I think it was Monday morning, Monday afternoon. I was listening to a message. Usually Monday I spend some time feeding me. And so I happened to be listening to this message, and the pastor, the preacher, was teaching on something, but then just kind of out of the blue, he mentioned something. Now, he was a pastor and he was also a pilot. And he briefly mentioned a gauge in an airplane called an attitude indicator. An attitude indicator. Looks like this. Let me show you a picture of it. Most of you have seen one. You probably know exactly what I'm talking about. Let's see if this works for our teaching. Kind of looks like that. You've probably seen it in movies and things like that. But when he said attitude indicator, I thought the pastor was taking what we call pastoral liberties. You know, when you kind of stretch it just a little bit to fit your message. Because I thought that actual gauge was called an altitude indicator. I thought it was an altitude indicator, and he kind of stretched it a little bit to make it fit his message. Well, he said it was he was just so positive about it. And so I thought, maybe it is. So went to Googled it, and sure enough, that's why I'm a pastor and not a pilot. It is an attitude indicator. It is an attitude. It's not an altitude indicator. It's an attitude indicator. Now, here's what that gauge does. It tells the pilot if his nose is up or if his nose is down. Some of you already see where this is going, don't you? If the nose is up, he's going up to another level. If the nose is down, he's going down. He is going down. Application for us. If you keep your head up, you are going to another level. You begin to drop your head and keep your head down, you are going down. Your attitude will determine the direction your life is going to go in. Your attitude will determine how you get through all these things that we're going through today. We live in some difficult times right now. And it's your attitude that's going to determine how you get through all of these things. And not just for today, but for a year from now, 2 years from now, in your own personal life, in your own individual struggles and situations. Your attitude is what will determine how you make it through all of these. I wish I knew who said this so I could give him credit. But I love this saying. It says this. Life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you respond. Let me say that again. Life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you respond to it. I don't know if those numbers are correct, but I imagine they're pretty close. And it's your attitude that determines how you respond to situations, difficult times, even good times. It's your attitude. Wouldn't it be great? I was thinking about this. Wouldn't it be great if we all had attitude indicators on us? Well, we actually do. We actually do. I know that when I've been teaching, sometimes you can be up there teaching. You could be just talking with somebody or sharing. It doesn't have to be in a teaching mode. But you can tell somebody's attitude just by looking. They have an attitude indicator on. If you're teaching and they're like this, yeah, you can read their attitude. So if you're teaching and they're like just writing down notes, and they're like, yeah, more. That's an attitude indicator. I know worship leaders who have gone up there and they've been leading in worship, and they look out at the congregation, the people, and some people are, that's an attitude indicator. Others are like, that's an attitude indicator. With your spouse, how many of you know you have an attitude indicator with your spouse? You see, attitude it determines. If your spouse says fine, how many of you know fine doesn't mean okay? It doesn't always mean fine. How many of you know that go ahead doesn't mean go ahead? The attitude behind those words are what actually makes those words. If your spouse says, fine. If your spouse says, go ahead. That's probably an indication that you probably shouldn't go ahead. Those are attitude indicators. Let me see if I can do this one for our screen today. How about this one? I don't know if my eyes rolled or not, but let's do it. You're talking with somebody and they just roll their eyes. Attitude indicator. Talking with your children, maybe you're a teacher teaching students. Attitude indicators. All of these things, gestures, all of these things are attitude indicators. Come on, we have all met somebody with attitude, right? All of us have met somebody with attitude. If you've never met a person with attitude, chances are you're the person with the attitude. Amen. You're the person with the attitude. Let me give you a verse. Philippians 2:5. It says this. It says this. You must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. I like that. Philippians 2:5. You must have the same attitude that Christ had. So, what kind of attitude is that? What kind of attitude did Christ have? In Matthew chapter 5, Jesus teaches something that today we've labeled them the Beatitudes. You've probably heard of it, Matthew chapter 5, the Beatitudes. The word Beatitude means blessed ones. This morning, I want to teach on the Beatitudes. Attitudes that Jesus says should be in us. Attitudes that should be in us. We can all have attitude, and we all have had attitude. But Jesus is talking about attitudes that should be in us. Not just an attitude that we should have occasionally or in a moment, but attitudes that should actually be in us. Attitudes that are the core of who we are. Now, Jesus gives us 8 of them. We're only going to look at 4 today. But Jesus, here's what he's basically saying. We're going to jump into the verse. He's saying, here's 8 attitudes that should be in you. These 8 attitudes should be the core of who you are. So if you've got a Bible, open it up to Matthew chapter 5. Jesus teaching, and he says this. Let me set up the Beatitudes, and then we'll jump right into them. Matthew chapter 5, verse 1. Jesus says, and seeing the multitudes, he went up on a mountain. And when he was seated, his disciples came to him. And then he opened his mouth and taught them, saying. Now I want to pause here because there's some stuff in there that you got to catch. I was reading that opening statement, and when I read it, I saw 2 groups of people. There's 2 groups of people here. There's the multitude, and then there's the disciples. It says that Jesus separated himself from the crowd and went up another level. The people in the multitude, they're good people. The people in the multitude, they like church. They like church. They like being fed. They like the healing. They even like the teaching. They like feeling good. They like a little worship. They like church. There's another group of people there, disciples. A disciple is one who takes it up to the next level. It's not just about church. They have their own prayer time. They get into the word on their own. These are those who are serious about his teachings and applying his teaching to their lives. They take it up another level. So we're going to jump into this. Matthew chapter 5, verse 3. Here's the first attitude that Jesus said should be in you and I. Here we go. Matthew 5:3. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now you're going to see in all of these attitudes that Jesus gives the beatitude and then he gives a promise. It's the same for all of them. And they all start with the same word, blessed. The word blessed means happy. Happy are those. Happy are those. Now, in this one, he says, happy or blessed are the poor. Pause there. The word poor meant a pauper. Someone who is going without. Here was my favorite definition. Someone who is in need of something. Someone in need of. Now, let me take a quick time out here. To be honest with you, when I first got saved, first couple years of my Christian walk as a new believer, I didn't really understand these Beatitudes. And the reason why is when you read them, let's be honest. Blessed, happy are the poor. Happy are those who mourn. Happy are those who are humbled. Happy are those who are hungry. Happy are those who are are persecuted? Seriously? Blessed? Happy? Nah, I didn't get that. I didn't get that understanding. So I want to give to you today and next week the correct meaning. Here's the first one. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Here's what it's saying. Blessed are those, remember that definition that I liked. Blessed are those who are in need of God's Spirit. Changes it, doesn't it? Blessed are those who are in need of God's Spirit. Blessed are those who recognize they need God. There's two types of people in the world today. People who think they don't need God. And these are the people who I can do it myself. I am a self-made man. I don't need anyone. And it's usually reflected in their decisions, in their actions, in their behavior, and in their attitude. Then there's those, like myself, who recognize, without God, I am nothing. I would not be here. I could not do this. I need Jesus every single day. I need him to guide me. I need him to direct me. I need him to tell me who to call, where to go, who to see, what to say. All of these things. I need him. I need him. I need him to help me with my wife. I need him to help me raise my kids. I need him in my job. I need him in relationships. I need Jesus every single day. If I do this on my own power, on my own strength, in my own wisdom, in my own understanding, it would be a mess. It would be a mess. I need him every single day. Now others get up and they say, they don't literally say this, but they're basically saying, I don't need God. I don't need God. I don't need God's help. They don't ask for his direction. They don't ask for his wisdom. They don't ask for his blessing or his favor. They don't read his word for guidance. They lean on their own understanding. And their lives will eventually end up empty. Empty. Blessed are those who recognize their need for God. And then the promise. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Again, I had a misunderstanding on these when I was a new believer. And here was my thought back then. Well, if you're poor down here, hey, be happy, be blessed. You get to experience the kingdom of heaven. Well, that's not really what it's saying. That's not what it means. But even if it was, that's still incredibly amazing to think that, man, I could be poor on this earth for this temporary life. And then for all of eternity, I could enjoy the kingdom of heaven. That's still a great thought. But that's not what it's saying here. Have you ever heard this phrase, heaven on earth? Heaven on earth. It's actually biblical. There's many different verses and some say it and word it differently, but it's actually biblical. They're all saying the same thing. So what's it look like to have the kingdom of heaven as part of your life here on earth? What's that look like? It's when God steps in and begins to order your life. When God opens doors that no one else can open, when you start receiving God's blessing and God's favor and breakthrough, the kind of life that you couldn't make happen even if you tried. It's when God steps in and begins to orchestrate the events in your life. Now, it doesn't always look the way we think it should look. And I'm going to explain that a little bit later. But he steps in and he begins to orchestrate the things in your life. Too many people today, even Christians, too many people today have just gotten used to a life without the supernatural, without supernatural things happening, without God moving in their life. We've just gotten used to a life apart from the supernatural. But the kingdom of heaven on earth is when the supernatural is happening in your life, when God is doing things. I love living a life where God is in control. I love living a life where God is opening doors that only God can open. I love living a life where God's supernatural favor is just everywhere. That's the kingdom of heaven. When you recognize your need for God, that you can't do it without him, God comes in, God steps in and says, well, don't worry. My kingdom will be yours. My kingdom will be with you. God is looking for people that have an attitude that says, I need God. And then he comes along and he says, I'll make my kingdom be a part of your life. You don't want to move on to the second one, but I saw this. It was either on a Facebook feed or on the news this week. The protests are still going on. And there was a preacher, some young guy who was preaching to the protesters, just sharing the word of God. And they literally chased him out of that area. They literally surrounded him, started yelling, cussing and swearing, and just chased him out of it. And many of the protesters were saying this to him: we don't need your God. Man, it broke my heart to hear him shouting that. We don't need your God. Listen, we are living in a day and age, and even in the circumstances that are going on, he's the one thing you do need. He's the one person you do need right now. Listen, I'm all for bills being passed, all of these things. But without God, we won't get through this division that is separating our nation. And there's a group of people, there's the world out there that begins to think, we don't need God. Yes, you do. He is the only answer to our problems. And it broke my heart to hear all of these protesters telling this guy, we don't need your God. Yes, you do. He's the only answer in this time of trouble. And if we don't recognize our need for God, we won't see the kingdom of heaven on earth. That just broke my heart. Let me move on to the second one. Matthew 5:4. It says this: blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are those who mourn, those who weep, those who grieve, those who cry. Blessed are those who experience grief. Why? Because they will be comforted. They will be comforted. Two definitions for mourn. One was experiencing pain over the loss of something close to you. Obviously a loved one, but it can also be, you can also mourn the loss of a job, the loss of a friend. Not that they died, but just they're gone out of your life. The loss of a relationship, the loss of a pet. Many people grieve when they lose a pet. The loss of an opportunity. All of these things can cause you to mourn, can cause you to cry. Now, as I was preparing this, I was thinking about how many of you growing up were told, don't cry. Stop crying. You big baby. Don't be a big baby, you whiner. Call an ambulance. Don't cry. Don't whine. Don't mourn. Did you know that crying is actually healthy? You ever heard this phrase? I just needed to get in a good cry. Crying is actually healthy. And crying, the problem is not crying. The problem is you keep crying. You keep crying. The problem is you keep crying and you don't go to work. You keep crying and you don't get out of bed. Cry, but after you cry, wipe away the tears, get in the car, and go to work. Cry, but after you cry, wipe away the tears, get out of bed. Cry, but after you cry, get up and go make something to eat. Go make some dinner. Cry, wipe away the tears, and go take care of the family. Cry, but then get up and do life. It's okay to cry, but get up, wipe away the tears, and do life. And do life. There's nothing wrong with the actual crying. Now, the second meaning for this word mourn was when our hearts hurt over the same thing that hurts the heart of God. That's another way to mourn. And as a nation and as individuals, we have not learned how to mourn or how to cry over our own sins. We don't cry or mourn over the state of our nation. We don't cry or mourn over the state of this world or our communities. We get mad. But do we mourn? See, God is saying right here, when you cry over the things that break my heart, when you feel the pain that others feel, when you're truly sorry over your own sin, when you're grieving, God says, and here's the promise, you shall be comforted. You shall be comforted. Here's what the word means. He will invite you to be near him. He will invite you to be near him. God says, when you cry, I'm going to come and stand by your side. When you hurt over the things that hurt me, I'm going to step into your life and provide comfort. Listen, some of you may be going through some things right now, even in this moment. Cry out to God, mourn to God, grieve to God. Have that attitude within you. And he says, man, and I'll come and I'll stand right by your side. I'll come and I will comfort you. Amen. He's the only one who can. So cry out to him, mourn to him, grieve to him. There's nothing wrong in that. There's nothing wrong in that. God says, happy are you, blessed are you when you mourn, because I will comfort you. Now here's the next one. Matthew 5:5. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are the meek, the humble, humility. The definition in this translation for this is to wait on God even while you're in pain. To wait on God even while you're in pain. And here's what God is saying. I love it when I see you with an attitude that says, I'm going to wait for God to vindicate me in this situation. Let me say it again. Here's what God is saying. God is saying, I love it when I see an attitude in you that says, I am going to wait for God to vindicate me in this situation. You see, the world says, you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you. You lie about me, I'm going to lie about you. You gossip about me, I'm going to gossip about you. You try to take me down, I'm going to take you down. You hit me, I'm going to hit you back. And Jesus is saying almost the opposite here. Jesus is saying, blessed are the meek, those who patiently wait for me to vindicate them. For him to, Jesus is saying, if you will just wait on me to vindicate you. And here's the promise. Those of us who wait, those of us who have that attitude in us, they shall inherit the earth. Again, a misunderstanding when I used to read this. Because I'd read this and think, okay, I would rather be poor and receive the kingdom of heaven than to be humble and inherit the earth, right? I mean, come on. Would you rather have the kingdom of heaven or inherit the earth? That's an easy decision. So I read this thing and I'm thinking, well, God, I'm just going to be poor and inherit the kingdom of heaven and forget about being meek or humble because I don't need to inherit the earth anyway. That's not what this verse is saying. That's not what it means. Here's what it's saying. God will give you on earth what they tried to take away or kept you from getting. You will inherit it. And when I say they, I mean people. I mean the enemy. God's saying he will give you on earth what people or the enemy took away from you or tried to keep you from getting. God says you will inherit it. You will inherit it. You see, because someone kept that job from you, because somebody denied you a promotion that you were supposed to have, that God wanted you to have, God says, because you waited on me to vindicate you, I'll make sure that you inherit it here on earth. Because you were denied justice and you waited on me to vindicate you. You didn't go out and get justice on your own. Because you were denied justice and you waited on me, I'll make sure that you inherit it here on earth. God is saying, when I find someone with a meek, humble attitude, I will elevate them. I will elevate them. I will lift them up. That's an attitude that Jesus is saying should be in all of us. Humility, humbleness. And you will inherit the things on earth that God has planned for you. Chapter 5, verse 6, next one. Blessed are those, let me make sure where I'm at. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. The word righteousness. The word righteousness means this, to be in a right standing with God, to be pleasing to God, to be in a right standing with God. He's saying, blessed are those who hunger and desire to be in right standing with me, pleasing to God. Now, many people desire to be in a right standing with people, but oftentimes people don't even think they don't even think about being in a right standing with God. And let me just tell you this. People can never give you or do for you what God can. So be in a right standing with God. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. And here's the promise. They shall be filled. They shall be filled. Filled means they shall be satisfied. Have you ever, how can I explain this? If you have the right hunger, I'm going to use that word hunger. If you have the right hunger for the things of God and to be in right standing with God, God says that he will satisfy you. Have you ever eaten a meal and just been satisfied? You know, I think in some customs, when you have a good meal, you're supposed to sit back in your chair and actually burp. And it's like, satisfied. That's what this word illustrates. Now, I don't know how many of you love Chinese food. I love Chinese food. I love orange chicken. And one of my favorites is teriyaki chicken on a white rice with lots of teriyaki sauce. Now, the thing about Chinese food, and I absolutely love it, but you can eat Chinese food and about 2 hours later, you're hungry again. You're hungry again. That's actually kind of what happens in the world. Society has told us all of our lives, if you get money, if you get that car, if you get that house, if you get education and degrees upon degrees, if you have the career, if you get this, if you get that, you'll be happy, you'll be satisfied. And there's a whole generation of people out there who have done that and actually gotten many of those things only to find out that it never satisfies. It never satisfies. Number one, there's always more. There's always more. I gotta get more. I gotta get more. You get to that point where you think, oh, this will satisfy me. And you just find out, oh, I need more. I need more. Or the second thing is, it's just temporary anyway. Fame, success, money, drugs, alcohol, stuff, it never satisfies like Jesus does. Jesus said, if you have a hunger and a thirst for a right to be in a right standing with me, you will be satisfied. This is true, 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 so true. And I've learned this. I told you earlier that I would talk about sometimes it doesn't always look like what we think it should look like. Even in this verse, to be satisfied. Some of you know our story, and I'll just quickly share it and then I'll close this up. In 2007 or in 2008, somewhere right in there, when everything